Hi, this is Laura Fulcher, and today I'd like to show you how to use the Mega Mount acrylic block by Impression Obsession. In the past, whenever you wanted to use a larger stamp, and this is one of the cover a card backgrounds by Impression Obsession, you had to get a large acrylic block. And one of the problems with the larger acrylic blocks is they're not always easy to hold in your hand. And even though this is a really large block, it's still not big enough to hold the cover card backgrounds, which are 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. So even if you got a block that was big enough, you might have already found out from your own stamping experience that stamping larger images with these flat blocks, sometimes you'll stamp and the center part doesn't come out very evenly. So in response to that, Impression Obsession came out with a really large block. It's 6 by 6, and it has a slight curve to it. And the advantage of that is that when you're rocking it across your paper, it lets each point be pressed down. So each part of the stamp gets pressed onto the paper, and you avoid that blank area in the center. So to use this, what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your cover card backgrounds or a large stamp. In this case, I have the Damask background, and I'm going to center it on my block. Make sure your block's clean, the back of your stamp's clean, so you get a nice firm grip on there. And you want to center it so that you get a nice even pressure on the stamp, but you also want to center it because if it has a distinct pattern to it, like a stripe, it's easier to line it up on the paper if it's nice and straight on your block. So to get started, you want to have a nice stamping surface. You want something that has a little bit of give. I have one of these purple stamping mats under here, but you could also use an old magazine, something that just has a little bit of give to it. And when you're choosing your ink, you can pretty much use any ink you want, anything that you would normally use on your rubber stamp. However, because this is such a large surface area, I find that your juicier pads, like your Colorbox Chalk or Colorbox Pigment, they work really well. It's easy to ink up the large area. And even though it's not a juicy pad, I've gotten really good results with VersaFine pads. It has a nice coverage to it. So before I ink up my stamp and show you, I just want to show you the mechanics of using the block. And so for this, I personally like to have my paper in a horizontal position, and I'm going to rock across the paper. When you're doing this, you'll want to stand up. That'll give you much better pressure and even coverage. But do as I say, not as I do. I'm going to sit down for the video. And again, I haven't inked this yet, but I'm going to use two hands and rock it across my paper, and that will be it. You'll have the urge sometimes to rock it back and forth for extra coverage. Don't do that, just because when you rock it back, you're not going to hit it in the same position as you did with that initial rocking, and you'll get a muddy image, and you don't want that. Some people in my classes prefer to have their paper in a vertical position. It's just whatever you prefer. When you're doing it this way, you don't have to worry so much as lining it up, making it all the way across the paper, but you do need to make sure that it's lined up from top to bottom so your stamp isn't, if you do it this way, obviously you're not covering all the paper. You need to make sure your stamp is going to cover everything. Two-hand it, stand up, and rock all the way across the paper. And that will be it. So let me show you how to do this with ink on my stamp. And when you are inking your stamp, some inks like this one show up really well on the stamp. You can see the parts that have ink. You can see the parts that don't have ink. Some colors, like a light pink, you can't see what spots you've missed. So my advice would be to just go over and over the stamp just so that you make sure each part has ink on it. So you're just going to cover that. Now, when I stamp this, again, you would be standing up for this. I'm going to line it up from top to bottom, so I have stamps, equal amount of my stamp from top and bottom. I'm also going to start just a slight bit off of the paper. Remember, my stamp is 5 3/4. My paper is 5 1/2. So I only have about a 1/4 of an inch extra. So I'm just going to start a hair off of my paper, rock it across, and that's it. You can see it's really easy. And this was an entire card that I did. So if you needed a card that took maybe 1 minute to make, you don't even have to put anything on top of it. You could just sign your name, write a quick note, and you're done. But of course, as crafters, you want to add a bunch of stuff on top. You can do that too. So I just showed you that it's really easy to use the Mega Mount, but I want to show you some of the versatility as well. This is a pattern paper I made with the Gingham cover card, and I just did pink on pink. And instead of buying a different pattern paper to make a card for a boy, I stamped the same stamp onto blue paper with blue ink and made something for a boy. Or maybe you wanted to do something that was a little more gender neutral, you could do that. Or maybe you're not making a card for a baby, you want to do something a little more vintage, you could do that. Or maybe you're doing something for Christmas, and so you switch to maybe a craft in a green. And with the same green ink, I stamped it on a little bit darker brown paper, so you can see you get a different look for that. Or maybe you don't want to stamp on brown at all. And this is one that I stamped, same green ink, but this time on a really bright green paper. So just by changing the paper or changing the ink, you're going to get such a different look. And this is kind of nice because you didn't have to buy all these different pattern papers. You can just create your own. Now that I've showed you how to use the Mega Mount and showed you how you can combine different colors of ink and paper to get various looks, I want to show you some of the end products. For this Halloween card, I stamped the Swirls and Stars cover card background and embossed it in black. And then I combined it with a different pattern. This is the screen cover card, just to give it a little more interest with using different patterns. For the Thanksgiving card, I just stamped on cream paper with brown ink and gave it, oh, this is the Swatches background, gave it a little more of a burlap look. And for my Christmas card, I stamped the thick and thin stripes on there because I thought it looked a little bit like the candy cane to match the handle of the drink. So for all 3 of these cards that I did, it was pretty much inking and stamping onto paper and using them as my pattern papers. For the next video, I'm going to combine more than one cover card on a paper to make a little more elaborate, layered look and designing your own papers. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.